When you think of classic Nintendo first-party titles, what comes to mind? An Italian plumber traversing a mushroom kingdom to confront a family of princess-napping lizards? An elfish boy in tights and tunic gathering power, wisdom, and courage to vanquish an ancient evil and save the land? An intrepid intergalactic bounty hunter laying waste to an entire species of alien life, destroying whole planets to eradicate its existence. Man, Metroid is dark. What about playing as a cute little pink puff who devours his enemies and digests their still living bodies to gain their powers? Okay, well, this whole intro was set up to describe a bunch of family-friendly Nintendo properties and then slap you in the face by talking about a first-party Nintendo-developed game where you rescue Joan of Arc from a witch burning, fight a certain mustachioed German, and witness baby Jesus get possessed by a demon, among other things. But I don't know if any of that is all that shocking anymore when you break down some of Nintendo's properties into their bare essentials. So, yeah, screw it. Today we're talking about Time Twist, a game Nintendo probably wants us to forget. Time Twisto Rekishi no Katasumide, or Time Twist in the Corners of History, is an adventure game developed by Nintendo R&D 4, the same team that developed Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. It was co-developed by Pax Softnica, whose only real claim to fame is assisting in the development of the Mother series, or Earthbound in the West, and Pokémon Snap. Time Twist was published by Nintendo on July 26, 1991 for the Famicom Disk System. Now, the Disk System was an interesting little thing, an add-on device that Nintendo released back in 1986, just 3 years after the launch of the Famicom, which would of course become known as the Nintendo Entertainment System in most of the rest of the world. Back in the mid-80s, Famicoms were selling fast, and games for the system even faster. Nintendo was having trouble keeping up with the demand. The production costs for cartridges were also expensive, and chip shortages weren't helping. So Nintendo started looking for ways to bring down costs and meet the staggering demand for their games. After much research, they eventually found their answer by turning to home computers with their cheap and easy-to-produce floppy disks. Floppy disks also allowed for more data storage, better sound, and the ability to save game progress onto the disk, a feature that wouldn't be implemented into Famicom games until the inclusion of batteries inside the cartridges. So Nintendo produced their own proprietary floppies that they dubbed disc cards. Nintendo promoted the add-on heavily, even going so far as to create a new mascot for the platform, Disc-kun. When it first launched in 1986, the Famicom Disk System was a huge success. The Disk System featured original, enhanced versions of some of the NES's best titles, like The Legend of Zelda and Metroid, as well as ports of earlier Famicom titles like the first Super Mario Bros., Donkey Kong, and Excitebike. It also featured healthy third-party support, especially from Konami, who developed a ton of great games for it. The original release of Castlevania, Esper Dream, and Arumana no Kiseki, just to name a few. Nintendo took advantage of the rewritable nature of the floppy disk format by setting up disk writer kiosks in stores where customers could have new games written onto their own disks for a modest 500 yen fee. They could even purchase blank discs for 2,000 yen. Considering how bullheaded Nintendo is with their copyrights nowadays, the notion seems almost unthinkable. But it happened. The disk system was so successful that Nintendo of America started filing patents to release a version for the NES as soon as it launched. By the time they had all their paperwork in order, though, the disk system had taken a turn for the worse in Japan, and plans for a North American release were dropped. You see, while the disk system had several advantages over the Famicom, it also had several drawbacks. First and foremost were the disks themselves. To cut costs, Nintendo used cheaper plastic than personal computer floppy disks and removed the shutter that protected the internals of the disk itself. This led to quality and reliability issues with disk cards. The plastic cases often cracked with use, and the sensitive magnetic disks inside were prone to collecting dust and fingerprints. The disk system itself was prone to errors and hardware failures as well. The cheap rubber drive belt inside the system often snapped or would get caught in the internal mechanisms. Their disk writer stations also encouraged piracy, and many retailers weren't happy about the amount of space they took up in their stores. By 1989, the problems with the add-on were piling up, and advances in cartridge technology led to cheaper production, while adding features like the aforementioned battery save. So the disk system was discontinued. But some games were still produced for it beyond 1989, which brings us to 1991's Time Twist, the last packaged game Nintendo ever released for the platform. When you start up Time Twist, the first thing you need to do is flip the disc. That's one little quirk of the disk system. Gotta flip those discs. Some disk system games also came on 2 discs, as is the case with Time Twist. There's a Zenpin, or first part disc, and a Kohen, or last part disc. Some NES and Famicom emulators feature disk system emulation. You just need to hunt down the BIOS for it. And disk system emulators include a flip disk feature, but there is no swap disk feature. So if the game comes on 2 discs, you're boned. Looking further into this, it seems like you would need to combine both disk ROMs into a single file with a hex code editor and do some editing to the ROM header as well to possibly get this to work. But I know pretty much nothing about this, so it wasn't an option. I had to go to a friend's house who owns a disk system to play and capture footage. That was my workaround. Naturally, Time Twist is also only available in Japanese. While researching, I found some forum posts with community members talking about translating the game, but it has some weird text compression written into the code that's apparently difficult to crack, so no progress has been made. Again, I don't know much about any of this stuff, so you'll have to do your own digging on those topics if you're interested. Just thought I'd bring them up before we get into things. So once you flip the disc and let the disk system itself take its sweet time loading things, we finally get into the game. Time Twist takes place in the far-flung year of 1995, September 25th, 1995 to be exact, which was a Monday, if any of you were curious about that. It starts with a news broadcast about physicist Professor Simon's time travel invention. We then cut to the nameless main character's room where he's watching TV. The news is boring though, so he switches to a fortune teller program, which have become all the rage in 1995. Here, we need to enter our birth date and answer some simple yes or no questions. Our answers don't seem to matter. Our fortune always turns out to be that we'll meet our true love at a local museum. All we need to do to ensure that this special someone ends up falling head over heels for us is repeat a short mantra. It's here where the transmission gets interrupted, and we see the phrase, Maradoru barao garadora. As far as I can tell, this phrase is just gibberish. But if anyone knows what this might be referencing, leave a comment. Our protagonist does comment that this seems strange, but figures it's worth a shot. It's only after he leaves that the regular transmission returns, and the words that are meant to be said are actually something more like, "When I see you smiling, it looks like the sun rising." I don't know, I think Maradoru barao garadora is gonna get more hearts jumping. We next watch our hero head to the local history museum and get his thoughts about the approach of the 21st century. You know the story. The world is shit, the environment is in shambles, war, starvation, natural resource shortages. Been there, done that. But because of all of this hardship, people have become more superstitious. Fortune-telling shows, like the one our hero was just watching, have become incredibly popular. So when someone comes along and says you're destined to meet a sticky najose at the local history museum, you drop everything you're doing and head for the local history museum. I love the presentation of this game. Some may find the little box where the actual events play out too small, with a bunch of wasted screen real estate. But I like it. The blocky border for the window, the blue backdrop, and this text box. Can we talk about this text box? The creamy beige interior, clean, relatively easy to read hiragana typeset, and wonderfully simple frame design. Mwah! Time Twist's whole aesthetic is so simple but so effective, not to mention the actual artwork. All of these little sprites participating in some really horrid stuff. It's fucking cute. The music throughout is also really catchy. It has a similar sound to the Famicom and NES, but you can hear the higher bitrate and the slightly better quality. played the game a few days ago, and as I'm writing this, I've still got some of Time Twist's tracks and sound effects stuck in my head. Time Twist was composed by Hajime Hirasawa, who also did music for Star Fox. It's good stuff. So, our hero arrives at the Demon Museum. I love that Time Twist is so overt with a lot of its humor. It's very Earthbound-like in that way. It doesn't make any bones about the fact that something bad is going to happen here. In front of the museum is where we're introduced to the gameplay of Time Twist, which consists mostly of choosing actions from a menu. We can look, talk, and move, but more options open up as you examine your surroundings, such as listen, take, use, and so on. There are even a few moments later on where we can walk around freely. By investigating the museum entrance, we find that the doors are locked. Nearby, there's a guy blocking our path into the woods. There's also a house and a church. We can enter the church and listen to the sermon. Afterwards, we speak to the priest and find out that the key to the museum is in the house nearby. That's where the proprietor of the museum lives. He's an old man who spent his life traveling the world and collecting strange artifacts that were related to demonology. We have to listen to him prattle on in particular about a painting that's hanging on his wall. It's one that he did himself, he boasts. He tells us it's a portrait of the devil, whom he saw in his younger days while he was serving in the Second World War. Yes, Gramps, we're all very proud of your satanic doodles. Thing is, upon closer inspection of this portrait, we find out it looks shockingly like our hero. Gramps here started the Demon Museum to research various demonic artifacts that have been found throughout history, and try to piece together exactly what he experienced during the war. Another little detail about Time Twist, even though it's a Japanese game, it doesn't seem to take place in Japan. It has a Western setting. Whether it's American or European is unclear. Anyway, Gramps allows us to take the key, and we enter the museum. There are several display cases lined up, all containing items that we'll come across in our upcoming journey through time. The most important one is in the display case at the end, the Devil Sealing Jar, an item that, according to the description, once housed the devil over 1,000 years ago. As we walk toward the entrance, we run into a girl. Not just a girl, though. The girl. As with everything in the game, we can look, speak, or walk away, but here we have another option. Attack. Now, we're not going to batter this poor girl in the empty museum here. In Japanese, the English word attack also means to attempt or try. In this particular situation, it could be translated as hit on. So we've got some more options. We can choose to hold her hand, we can grab her by the shoulders, we can try to make her laugh, we can pay her a compliment, or we can scream. I'm something of an alpha male myself, so I know what the correct answer is. Ah! Gets him every time. So anyway, yeah, we pay her a compliment, but then we have to choose what to compliment her on. Her eyes, her nose, her ears, or her boobs. Naturally. Turns out this weirdo likes to have her ears complimented. Whatever, I guess. Just as we start to win over the young lady, an earthquake strikes, and the only thing our hero can think to do is recite the mantra he heard on TV. Maradoru Barao Garadora. This makes the earthquake stop, but the shaking has broken the display case for the Devil Sealing Jar, and out pops the devil. So he wasn't at one time trapped in that jar, he still was, and we've been duped into speaking the incantation to break him out. How does he thank us for giving him his newfound freedom? He possesses our body, but he forces out our own soul and plops it back into his decaying demonic form. He runs off and we roam the town as the devil, scaring away the guy who was blocking the path into the nearby forest. Turns out Professor Simon, the physicist we saw on the news earlier who created the time machine, lives back in the woods here, and the devil, using our body, has stolen Professor Simon's invention, which is actually a time belt. He's also burned down the professor's house. I mean, he's the devil. What, do you think he was going to be satisfied with just a little B&E robbery? Of course he's going to add arson on top of that. We run into him in the forest, wearing the time belt. So proudly. Look at that stance. He declares that he has some business to take care of. Through time. He then uses the belt to warp out of this era. We get wrapped up in this as well, and our adventure begins. While we're busy slipping through time, we get this short little introduction scene of a priest moving through some underground location, like a dungeon. In one of the rooms, a pentagram is drawn on the floor, surrounded by candles, and the devil, riding around in our body, appears. God, I love this little animation. If YouTube could do animated thumbnails, this would have been it for this video. After that, we find ourselves in the house of Pierre, who's praying to God to give poor people strength. His faith is, let's just say, tested when we appear as the devil in his living room. Our demonic body isn't holding up so well. The skin is dry and cracked, and touching it causes pieces to fall off. Pierre puts his faith in God in this 15th century wooden house and tosses a lit candle at us before passing out. This burns up our demon body, setting our soul free. In some sense, we're still alive, so our hero says, and since Pierre doesn't have a need for his body at the moment, we possess him. According to the text box, we've found ourselves in France in the year 1428. Inside one of the other houses here is an old man who quizzes us on some history. This kind of thing happens in each of the eras we pass through, technically making Time Twist an educational game. It doesn't matter if you're not a history buff. The questions are multiple choice and you can just keep trying until you get the right answer. If we head to the prison, we find an old man named Rugo out front begging for someone to save his granddaughter, a young woman who would just so happen to be instrumental in defending France from English invasion during the 100 Years' War, Joan of Arc. She's currently on trial for witchcraft. According to historical documents, this particular event never happened, but who knows what kind of secret history Nintendo has hidden in the depths of its austere corporate base. Well, there's nothing we can do here for now. About the only thing we can do is pick up an empty wine bottle off the street, fill it from one of the casks in Pierre's home, and get so blasted that we pass out and our soul leaves his body. In other words, a Monday afternoon. As an incorporeal entity, we can slip inside the prison to search for Joan, but she's not in any of the cells upstairs, so it's back to Pierre's body. Wish I could metabolize alcohol as fast as this dude. We fill up another bottle and slip it to the guard on duty. He tells us that the bishop has Joan in one of the dungeon cells in the basement, and he's torturing her. So we down another bottle of wine ourselves, pass out again, and slip back into the prison. This time we find a way down to the dungeon and discover the bishop with Joan of Arc strung upside down. The bishop says the voice of God told him to kill Joan of Arc because she'll become a threat later. Again, there's not much we can do here without a body, so we leave the prison just in time to hear that Joan will be burned at the stake as a witch. When we head back to Pierre's, we find him missing. He's headed to the tavern down the street and is in an argument with a priest named Chino. Pierre is very drunk and keeps insulting the priest, who knows that the bishop's verdict is wrong, but still hesitates to do anything about it. Out of frustration and bolstered by 2 bottles of red wine, Pierre attacks Chino and knocks him out. Lucky for us, because now we can steal his body. When Rugo asks us to do something to save Joan, we agree. As a priest, we can enter the prison freely, but first we need a key to one of the rooms in the basement. For some reason, the key is in a storehouse near the bar. There's also a hint here for how to find the correct door in the basement that this key unlocks. As we'll soon find out, the basement of the prison is a bit of a maze. There are several different passages to follow, and choosing the wrong direction will put us back at the beginning. We, as Chino, borrow a monk's habit from the local guild for a disguise, then head into the prison. No one makes a fuss when we enter, and we head down to where Joan is hanging out. I swear that wasn't meant to be a joke, it just happened when I wrote it. But yeah. We get her down and attempt to leave, but the guard stops us. I don't know why we thought just walking out the front door would ever work. We're ordered to take her back to the basement, where we run into the bishop. He knocks out Chino, and we leave his body down here in this dank dungeon. He'll be fine. Outside, they're ready to burn Joan at the stake for being a witch. This is like the cutest depiction of a witch burning I've ever seen. And trust me, I've seen some cute witch burning depictions. Back inside the prison, we find the Baron, who can't believe that Joan is actually a witch, and he wonders what happened to the bishop to drive him this crazy. The guard says there's a rumor that the devil may be responsible for what's happening, and the Baron says they'll need proof first. Back downstairs, we take control of Chino's body again and find a secret passage that leads to several rooms below the prison. This is the maze I mentioned earlier, but even if you miss the instructions, it's not too difficult to navigate. Eventually, we arrive at a red door that's opened with the key we found in the storehouse. Inside, we find a box in the middle of a pentagram. This box should look familiar to you. It was in one of the display cases in the museum at the beginning of the game. Inside the box is the contract the bishop made with the devil. Showing it to the Baron gives him the proof he needs to stop the witch burning. Outside, though, it's already started. The Baron holds up the contract the bishop made with the devil for all to see. The crowd calls for the bishop to be arrested. Then, well, that was easy. Joan says that while the fire was burning, she heard the voice of God telling her to fight against the invading English and save France. If we check the actual history, it turns out that Joan had been experiencing these godly messages well before 1428. But who are we to argue with the grand historians at Nintendo? In that moment, we're warped through time again. We awaken in front of a barbed wire fence at night, wearing a military uniform and finding something in our pocket that turns out to be wire cutters. As we attempt to cut the fence, a siren blares and a searchlight falls on our position. 2 soldiers appear and take us captive, saying that we'll be spending the next 2 weeks in solitary confinement. We've arrived in July 1944 in a German POW camp. The person we've inhabited this time is Cougar, an American Air Force member. So we find ourselves in solitary confinement, but a voice outside the cell tells us that with the information we've collected, they'll be able to take down the enemy, so we should get our body ready for the prison break. Then there's this guy right here. Hitora? Oop, gonna need to fix this flag on the wall too. There we go. So this guy here makes a deal with the devil, who gives him some of his power. He knows there's a resistance forming in Europe and asks the devil to kill his betrayers. But the devil says he's not into that small fry stuff, so he should just take care of it himself. Meanwhile, we, as Cougar, have been released from solitary confinement. Inside our barracks, we can talk to some of the other prisoners. Now, in the few write-ups about this game that I've seen floating around the internet, the articles mislabel the setting of this scenario. Maybe that's due to not understanding Japanese, or maybe it's a way to further sensationalize the game, but either way, they're wrong. This is a POW camp, and the prisoners are other American soldiers who have been captured by the Germans. There was a difference. Ralph here says there's a park to the west where we should look for someone named Rebecca who will give us support. We need to speak the secret phrase before we get any help, though. Instead of the usual proclamation of support that many on the German side shouted to their ruler, our super secret resistance phrase is Kutabare Hitora. Kutabaru is an interesting word. Normally means to be exhausted, like completely and utterly drained of energy. However, the more common, derogatory use means to die, to drop dead, to kick the bucket. Used in the imperative form, as in to make a request or give a command, kutabare means drop dead, go to hell, or probably the way it's translated most often, fuck you. So the Resistance's super secret password to prove that you're one of them is fuck you, Hitora. Subtle. Another prisoner, Frankie, mentions a rumor he's heard that the US and Germany are in a race to create an atomic weapon. That night, we speak to Frankie again and he gives us a pendant, a good luck charm that used to belong to his grandmother. After placing the pendant around our neck, we push the stove in the barracks aside and head into the escape tunnel. After popping out of the ground, we throw a rock to distract the nearby guard and make our escape. Sometime later, we're in the park that Frankie spoke of, looking for Rebecca. We get another history quiz from a park worker, and after using our resistance phrase, get some information from a few people in the park. There's a message in a bottle in the fountain, but it's only one part of a secret message. Next, we meet the physicist, Simon. The same Simon who would go on to create the time machine. He's asked Rebecca to help him flee the country. Simon only has a part of a secret message, and when we combine this with the letter we found in the fountain, we get the full thing. Head to an old watermill about 4 kilometers southwest of the park and wait for further instructions. While waiting in front of the watermill, Simon and Cougar have a conversation about the pendant Cougar's wearing. The pendant has an engraving, but it's too old and rusted to make out the words. The age and the rust causes Simon to mention that he often thinks about what it would be like to be able to travel back in time. He mentions Einstein and says that his intellect should be used for good, not to make weapons. So we get a little bit of Oppenheimer light here. But this is actually a very poignant moment in the game. For a title that has very little dialogue, comparatively to adventure games that would come later, Time Twist does a lot with a little. Its restraint in dialogue is often overshadowed by the bombast of the actual events and visuals, but I like the dichotomy. It's really interesting. Afterwards, the woman we met in the park appears with a gun. This is Rebecca, and it seems we've been set up. A man in a car also arrives. We're whisked through the German countryside where we find out that the man, Schmidt, is actually a double agent. How fortunate. Kutabare Hitora, the three joyously shout. So Schmidt says he's taking Cougar and Simon to the American embassy in Switzerland. However, a voice calls out from somewhere saying that we'll never escape. Yes, the man has used his new devil powers to pull us into some kind of rift in reality, and the only thing to do is fight. After a few rounds of futilely attempting to fight against him, we pull out the pendant that Frankie gave us. It shines brightly, temporarily blinding our foe. In that moment, the years of wear and rust disappear. While floating upside down in this rift in time, Cougar attempts to yell out what the engraving says several times. Finally, he reads out the inscription, which translates to something like righteousness to the wandering people. If you know anything about the Bible, you'll know who the wandering people are. This exorcises the devil's power, and Cougar, Schmidt, and Simon return to Earth. They make their way across the Rhine into Switzerland and on to freedom. Turns out Cougar, the person we possess during this era, is the man who would become the proprietor of the Demon Museum in the present. Neat. Back in his lair, the German begs the devil to take him away from here, but the devil says there's still much evil for him to commit. The contract they made lasts until next year. The devil says to remember the date, April 30th, 1945, and bids him farewell. Until next time, in hell. So that's the end of Time Twist's first part. After swapping discs, we begin with a scene of the devil being a little shit and destroying a statue of Athena. So we find ourselves sometime in and around 400 BC. We've inhabited the body of a doctor named Nicholas. Soon, our assistant Dario comes to get us. Throughout the early section of this time period, we need to go around helping various sick or injured people around town. This involves examining their bodies and then prescribing them the correct treatment. It's actually pretty fun. At one point, we run into a man who's looking for his young master, a boy from a rich family that was in his care but has run off. We also take this era's history quiz from an old fisherman south of town. After returning to town, we find the man again. He tells us the boy he was with was wearing a Persian-style gold sash, and implores us to let him know if we see the boy anywhere. After he leaves, the merchant here tries to sell us a Persian-style gold sash. The man comes rushing back and demands to know where his young master is. The merchant says he found the boy lying on some rocks by the cape. He figured the dead didn't need fancy clothes, so he took the sash and left the boy there. At the cape, we find the boy right where the merchant said he'd be. We try to resuscitate him but are unsuccessful until a voice tells us that we can't let this boy die. It goes on to say that this boy has been chosen by God. So our soul is separated from the body of Nicholas and we're off to find a way to save the boy. Heading back to the Temple of Athena, where the devil knocked the head off the statue earlier, we ask the goddess for guidance. She tells us the boy is currently crying at the gates to the underworld, and we'll need the help of the gods to travel there and bring the boy back to the land of the living. We can then go and speak to all of the statue busts around town. There's Hermes, Artemis, Orion, Poseidon, but the one in the forest, where we happened to help out a soldier with a bum knee earlier,
I used to be an adventurer like you, and I took an arrow in the knee.
Is the one we're looking for. This is Hades, god of the underworld, and he agrees to take our soul there. When we arrive, we come face to face with the three-headed dog Cerberus, guardian of the gates to the underworld. Os. Cerberus uses this really casual greeting that usually translates to something like, hey man, or yo, or what's up. So good. Before Bro Cerberus will let us enter the underworld, though, we need to answer his riddle. 5 men appear before us on the steps, and we need to guess who they are based on the hints they give. They are, from left to right, Plato, Socrates, Herodotus, Pythagoras, and Homer. After solving his riddle, Cerberus lets us enter the underworld. Immediately, we find the boy's spirit. That was easy. However, the devil inhabiting our body also appears. We then find ourselves in this battle for the young boy's soul, with the devil calling him over to his side and us trying to call the boy away from him. The devil's will almost wins him over, when suddenly a bell rings out. Back in the land of the living, the man is ringing a bell trying to bring back the young boy. He's calling the boy a prince, and it's revealed that this boy is actually Alexander the Great, and the man is Aristotle. You might have already guessed that, depending on your knowledge of Greek history. Back in the underworld, we rush to the boy and whisk his spirit back to his body. We don't get a lot of time to celebrate our victory before we're thrust into another time warp. When will we end up next? Oh, you might not recognize him without his stovepipe hat, but that is Abraham Lincoln up there, giving the Emancipation Proclamation. We've arrived in America in 1864. And, oh boy, look at this scene. So we are the young boy lying here in the field, and this man is Meyer, the owner of this place, who says we've passed out due to a case of heat stroke. The screen that gives us information about the when, where, and who of our scenario says that our name is George and that we're a servant on the Meyer farm. Alright, let's do this. When we awaken, we find ourselves in a rundown shack with the woman from earlier kneeling by our bed. This is George's mother, Belle, and the first thing she tells us is that we're not actually a dore anymore, so we don't have to work so hard. I'll leave it to you to guess what dore means, and it's got nothing to do with the sound of music. Next to the bed, George finds $100 in the dresser, which is like $2,000 adjusted for inflation. Belle tells us she's been saving up that money for decades now. Many of the others have already left the farm, and Belle figures it's about time for her and George to get away too. So we go ahead and speak to Mr. Meyer about leaving, and surprisingly, he says once we've finished up a bit more work, we're free to go. We have to follow Meyer's instructions for the day, which he gives in a long list that we get quizzed on. It involves chopping a certain amount of wood, getting some buckets of water from the stream, picking weeds from the lawn, and repairing the roof. When we get the list right, we watch George work. When that's finished, Meyer returns and tells us that Tom, another servant still on the farm, is having trouble and we should help him out too. Tom's name is clearly a reference to Uncle Tom's Cabin, the 1852 novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe. But there's no real substance to this reference, other than this character is a black man named Tom. Anyway, Tom's work is basically a math puzzle. We have $1,000 and need to buy cows, sheep, and pigs at different prices, so we need to figure out how many of each we can buy with the money. Ugh, basic math is my worst nightmare. After we help Tom out, Meyer appears again and tells us Belle needs our help in the house now. This list of work just keeps getting longer and longer. Over in the house, Belle needs to fill some bottles with the correct amount of milk so they don't spill. There are a few ways to get this done, but once we do, Meyer again appears and says it's a bit too late to leave now, so why don't we wait until tomorrow? This guy. I'm telling you, I don't trust this guy. In the middle of the night, as Belle and George sleep in their shack, a light leaks through the window. And then... No. Oh no, what the fuck? I really cannot show you what happens on the next screen, but there's a tree and some rope involved, and eventually George winds up on the ground, so our soul leaves his body. The men end up stealing the money that Belle had stashed away, and after that they knock her out and leave. My god. Our soul enters Belle's body next, and she finds a cave where the men are worshipping the devil's hand. another item from the museum. The next morning, Belle tells Meyer what happened the night before, and he says it's okay because she can just keep working here until she saves up enough money again. Oh, really? Wow, gee, thanks. He says he's off to meet a friend and not to enter the mansion while he's away. As we wander around, we find George out working in the field, so I guess they only strung him up the night before and didn't, you know. When we visit Tom again, we find an old man who gives us the quiz for this time period. Later on, Meyer returns with his friend, who turns out to be none other than old Honest Abe. Wow. Meyer apprises Lincoln on George and Belle's situation. Maybe Meyer isn't the bad guy that I suspected him to be. He even lets George and Belle stay in the house for the night while Lincoln is visiting. George is just excited that he got the chance to speak to the president. Meyer tells Belle to take some coffee to Lincoln's soldiers who were stationed outside the house. They relish the refreshment. Later, Belle slips out of the room and has a look around. She looks in on Meyer and Lincoln, still sitting in the parlor, and then checks out more of the house. In Meyer's room, she finds a set of drawers with a secret compartment, and inside she discovers a whip and a white hood. I knew it. I knew that shifty old fuck was up to no good. Belle rushes back to the parlor. Meyer is attempting to cut a deal with Lincoln, who's come to realize the type of person he's dealing with. As Lincoln gets up to leave, Meyer blows a whistle and a hooded man appears and holds Lincoln at gunpoint. It turns out the coffee that was offered to Lincoln's soldiers earlier was drugged, so they're both passed out. Upstairs, George has already been captured. Meyer calls for George and Belle to come downstairs. Meyer now has everybody right where he wants them. What diabolical plan does the devious Meyer have in mind for our heroes and Abraham Lincoln? Well, he strands them on an island and says that with the rain, the little landmass will be submerged within the hour. There are also some coyote out here for some reason. Meyer gives Lincoln one last chance to save himself with a little wooden boat. He explains that the coyote will only attack if they can outnumber their prey. Then he pushes the boat over to our side, so we've got a puzzle to solve. Meyer might as well be twirling his mustache right now. This is right up there with leaving a damsel in distress on the train tracks. So we need to get Lincoln, Belle, and George across to the other shore, but we can't leave any of them outnumbered by coyote. So we need to send the coyote across as well, which looks absolutely ridiculous. The key to this puzzle is keeping the number of people balanced with the number of coyote. It's fairly simple, and I cannot get over how hilarious it is seeing Abraham Lincoln in a little wooden boat with a coyote. After we've gotten everyone safely to the other side, George insists that we save the coyote as well, which, I mean, yeah, I don't want the coyote to drown either, but we've got more pressing matters at hand here, George. So anyway, once everyone is safely on the other shore, we can leave. Back at the house, Meyer is just casually explaining to the soldiers that Lincoln was kidnapped by these strange men in hoods, and he has no idea how any of this could have happened. When Lincoln shows up, he's just like, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you're safe. So then you're alone?" But of course, Belle and George appear as well. Well, shucks, doesn't Meyer look like a fool now? Before we get any kind of resolution to this scenario, our soul flies away and we enter another time warp. And that's it. We didn't even see the devil in this time period. I mean, we saw the devil hand earlier, but we didn't do anything with it. It's kind of weird. But certainly not as weird as seeing this era of American history depicted in a Nintendo game. I'm actually surprised it's not quite as insensitive as you would imagine it to be if you only heard the description of the scenario. I don't know, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of different opinions on this section in the comments. When we arrive at our next destination in time, we see a man named Joseph sitting on a hill under a withered tree overlooking a small village with his donkey, and we've possessed the donkey. Joseph has a bit of a conundrum on his hands. His wife, Mary, is pregnant, but according to him, he's never even held her hand. So we've arrived around the year 4 BC in Nazareth. Our name is Kashim, and our job is donkey. Back in the village, it takes a bit of time to untie ourselves from the tree, but once we do, we head into Joseph's workshop. Joseph's a carpenter, furiously sanding down this plank of wood. He's still upset about his situation with Mary. There's a necklace sitting on one of the shelves, and Joseph tells us to get away from there because it's an anniversary gift for Mary. Speaking about Mary again just makes him cry while working. Over in the nearby house, Mary is inside and has a gift for Joseph as well. A bangle. When we head back outside, a child tells the old man here that some other kids are gathered near the river waiting to hear his story. So we head over to listen to the story too. He tells of their people's persecution, of the 40 years spent wandering the desert, and assures the children that a savior will soon be born. A story straight from the book of Numbers in the Old Testament. Back in the village, Joseph has stepped out, so we can eat Joseph's gift to Mary and barf it up for her. She wastes no time putting the necklace on, donkey slobber and all. She also asks us to take her gift to Joseph, so we eat the bangle and barf it up for Joseph over on the hill. This regurgitation of gifts isn't enough to get Joseph to believe the story of an immaculate conception. Just then, the sky parts and the devil wearing our body descends from the heavens. He says that he's an angel who bears a message from God. Surprisingly, he tells Joseph to forgive Mary because she's carrying God's son, but he adds that he should name the boy Demon. Then he pieces out. What a devious plot. Time Twist seems to be following the account of Jesus' nativity from the Gospel of Luke, because shortly before the birth, a Roman soldier appears to take a religious census on behalf of Caesar Augustus. Fearing religious persecution, Joseph takes Mary to Bethlehem. During their long trip through the desert, our donkey nose catches the scent of something and we run off. There's a tent set up in the desert with a camel outside. Since we're a donkey, we can talk to other animals. And this camel says, "Nandape?" Now, in the more commonly used West Kanto dialect of Japanese, this question would be phrased more like, "Nandesu ka?" But both phrases mean basically the same thing. What do you want, or can I help you? The significance here is this camel has an Ibaraki accent. Ibaraki is a rural prefecture northeast of Tokyo where I actually lived during my first year in Japan, so I recognize the peculiarity of this phrase right away. Japanese, like most languages, has many regional dialects, or ben as they're called. The one that's spoken most prominently in Japanese dramas and anime is the West Kanto or Tokyo dialect. The other really famous one is Kansai Ben, spoken around the Osaka area of west central Japan, which in English localizations usually gets equated to an American southern accent.
Dad got invited by a hotel to work at their restaurant. Uh-huh. You know how Dad trained in France to be a chef? Well, he said he's been itching to work in a real kitchen.
Ibaraki Ben, on the other hand, would probably equate to a rougher, more backcountry kind of drawl.
Well, you know, Bobby, I tell him don't take it from me, man. It don't life too short, man. You don't want to hold no grudge, man.
Story time. Once, during summer, when I was living in Ibaraki, I had a friend visit from Tokyo. She was a born and bred Tokyoite, never having really set foot outside the city. Her Japanese was a perfect West Kanto dialect. At the end of the weekend, we stood at the bus stop as the driver loaded passenger luggage into the undercarriage of the bus. He seemed like a friendly guy, and when he grabbed her bag, he looked up and asked her a thick, Ibaraki Ben-laden question.
"Nandape?"
He didn't say that. I don't remember exactly what he said, but she stood there quietly for just a beat past awkwardness, so I turned to look at her and saw the confusion on her face. That's when she developed a case of the is. If you don't know what that is, watch any Japanese drama or anime and wait for a scene where a character is confronted with a situation that's outside of their comfort zone. You may think this is just some dramatic idiosyncrasy of Japanese entertainment, but I assure you, it happens in real life, all the time. That's why they do it on TV. During that same time period, after that summer break, I returned to work as an assistant language teacher in an Ibaraki junior high school. It was the first day back, and I was asking the kids what they did during their summer vacation. Naturally, one of them asked me what I did. When I told them I'd climbed Mount Fuji during the break, I swear to you, the entire classroom did a collective that was probably heard the next town over. It happens in real life. So anyway, there my friend was in front of this local Ibaraki bus driver, her polite Japanese veneer cracking under the pressure of all those tiny is involuntarily escaping her lips. She turned to me and quietly asked, in English, "What did he say?" Now, At this point, I had only lived in Japan for a few months and was still coming to terms with the fact that my nearly 1 year's worth of studying the language while in America was effectively useless. So the fact that a Japanese person had just turned to me to ask what another Japanese person had just said, in Japanese no less, broke my brain. As an American, I naturally wasn't as good at concealing my disposition as my Japanese friend, so I'm pretty sure I made one of those quick head turns accompanied with an expression like she had just asked me the weather on Mars, and shouted, "How the hell should I know?" Anyway, she got through it with a polite "Daijoubu desu," boarded the bus, and returned to Tokyo without incident. The takeaway from the story, though, is that I was shocked to learn that sometimes even Japanese people can't understand other Japanese people. And this camel in this 34-year-old video game saying "nandappe" unlocked all of those memories and more that I don't have time to go into. The power of video games. So we talk to this camel, who lets us partake in his food. Meanwhile, Joseph and Mary meet 3 men inside the tent. Joseph asks the way to Bethlehem, and they each offer different directions. The man on the right says to head east. The man in the middle says to head north. The man on the left says to head west. We get a riddle with these 3, and we need to decide which one to trust. The man on the right says the man in the middle is not careless. The man in the middle says the man on the left is not honest. And the man on the left says the man on the right is a liar. The camel gives us the hint that leads to the solution. One of them is an honest person who never lies. One always lies, and one is a careless person who occasionally lies. By that logic, the careless person who occasionally lies is the man in the middle. The liar is the man on the right, and the honest person is the man on the left. So if the man on the left is in fact honest, we should follow his directions and head west. So that's exactly what we do, which leads to Bethlehem. Out in the desert, 3 wise men follow the Star of Bethlehem to the town. Upon arrival, Joseph and Mary can't get a room at the inn on account of it being all booked up, so they take shelter in a barn nearby. Mary has gone into labor, so we, as Kashim the donkey, go around talking to the other barn animals. There's a cow, a horse, and a sheep. They all have Ibaraki accents. The cow goes on to say that she doesn't really get it, but she feels like something crazy is about to go down. Call it animal instinct. We can inspect a big old pile of shit on the ground in front of her, and the cow just says, "Shit is shit, right?" Right. She also warns us not to eat it, and we're just like, well, yeah, of course. But I feel like the way it's written is more like our stupid donkey was fixing to eat that shit until the cow said something. When we speak to the horse, we find out that it's a mare, which brings up the option to try to hit on her in a scene that's reminiscent of the opening where we tried to hit on the girl in the museum. The girl in the museum liked having her ears complimented. For the horse, it's her teeth. The sheep gives us our history quiz for this portion of the game. Once all of this is done, we lie down for a nap. Outside, the 3 wise men arrive, and later, the baby is born. Joseph tells Mary that an angel visited him in Nazareth and told him to name the child Demon. The 3 wise men enter, telling the story of how they followed the Star of Bethlehem to this town to find the Son of God. They present their gifts, and Joseph says that Demon will be glad to accept them. And the wise men are all like, "Demon? What the fuck kind of name is that for the Son of God?" Just then, the devil appears, still pretending to be an angel, and tells Mary to bring the baby to him. Mary isn't buying this charade and says she's not handing her baby over to the devil. Mary demands to know what the devil wants with her child, so he tells his story. 30 years into the future, he tries to make a bargain with Jesus, who refuses him and seals him in a jar. The same jar he broke out of in the beginning of the game. The same jar that one of the wise men has brought as a gift on this day. So the devil has traveled back in time to seek his revenge. I don't know why we were jumping around to all those different eras if this is when he wanted to go in the first place, but I guess we wouldn't have had much of a game otherwise, so, you know. The wise men attempt to use the devil sealing jar, but the devil sets it on fire before they can get to it. With the devil about to take his revenge on the defenseless baby Jesus, we, as Kashim the donkey, decide it's time to act. So we bite the devil in the ass. During the struggle, the devil loses his concentration, so one of the wise men manages to grab the jar and extracts the devil from our body. Joseph, Mary, baby Jesus, and the three wise men leave the barn, and sometime later we awaken and manage to reclaim our own body. Finally. We're still wearing the time belt too, so we use it to travel back to our own time of 1995. Upon returning to 1995, we find that the world is not how we left it. It's completely in ruins. Under some rubble, we find a manhole that we remove to enter a small fallout shelter. Someone has been down here for a long time, and there's a journal on the ground. It turns out that our time traveling has caused some major disruptions to the timeline. The Second World War lasted much longer, and the end result was nuclear annihilation. There's a picture hung on one of the walls, and here we find the devil's portrait again, but this time, it's Jesus. This is when we realize that the devil wasn't captured in the jar. Instead, he had possessed baby Jesus. So we use our time belt to head back to the night of Jesus' birth. We manage to get back into our own body before everyone leaves the barn. Of course, everyone thinks that we're still the devil, but we proclaim that we aren't, and that the devil wasn't trapped in the jar, he's actually inside the baby.
Damn! The baby!
No one seems to believe this, but the devil gives himself away. He says that he now possesses the body of the Son of God, and that his beautiful demonic form has taken over. We go over and grab the jar and shout, "Kutabare Akuma!" Fuck you, devil. After that, we play a variation of the shell game, but instead of finding a ball underneath some cups, we need to guess which demonically possessed baby Jesus is the real demonically possessed baby Jesus. After guessing correctly a few times in a row, the devil gets frustrated and gives us a final quiz, this time on the events of the game. Once we get the questions right, the devil musters all of his power and attacks us in this really gnarly scene, very Earthbound final boss-like. As we're getting zapped by demonic power, we beseech Jesus to awaken and use his godly powers to drive the devil out of his infant body. So that's what he does. Then we use the jar to seal away the devil for good. Afterwards, we bid farewell to Kashim, Joseph, and Mary. Joseph thanks us for saving his newborn son, Demon. Oh yeah, he still thinks naming the baby Demon was a good idea. So we tell him, yo, that's a terrible name. How about Jesus instead? And Joseph is like, hey, I like that. Afterwards, we use the time belt to return to 1995 once more. We awaken in the museum and find the girl by our side. Seems that we've managed to seal away the devil's power and set the timeline right. When we ask for the girl's name, another earthquake strikes. The girl tells us not to worry, and she begins reciting the same spell that we did in the beginning of the game. Maradoru Barao Garadora. She tells us she heard the words on the fortune-telling show this morning, and if she recited them, she'd meet her special someone. And that's the end. So I guess it's the girl's turn to go tripping through time now. What an ending. But it seems fitting considering all the crazy stuff we went through to get here. Time Twist is a wild ride. It's incredible that something like this was made at all. Only in Japan. Menu-based adventure games weren't even close to being marketable for Nintendo of America or Europe at the time, but even so, all of the controversial themes, graphic images, and sensitive subject matter fell far afield of Nintendo's content policies in the West. But despite all of that, it's just such a fascinating thing. The gameplay is nothing more than guess the correct multiple choice answers and watch the story play out. But the music is solid, the artwork is crisp and colorful. Its views on American and European history are clearly from a distanced outsider's perspective, sidestepping the real-life atrocities, but still calling some attention to the fact that these ugly things happened. It's history. If we erase it or shy away from it, How will we ever learn to be better? So, yeah, that's it for Time Twist. I hope you enjoyed it. It's one that I've been considering covering for a while now and finally just bit the bullet. So thanks to anyone who's still watching at this point. Give it a like, leave a comment, share it with a friend, subscribe if you haven't already. That's all stuff that helps me out. If you really like what I do, you can join these people on screen by supporting me each month on Patreon or through YouTube memberships. Any amount of support gets your name in the video, gets you access to exclusive updates from me, gets you access to the Dungeon Dwellers Archive, which is a bunch of bonus videos that I release only to supporters. I just put out a new one a couple weeks ago on an old DOS game called Blue Ice, so you can get access to that and the others that I've made. If you donate, and if you give $5 or more, you get your name read out loud at the end of videos like these, Dungeon Architects. 2 Password for Kids, An Owl, Antichrist Alex, Benifer94, Blake Golan, Bliblio Jones, Chaos Arcanum, Dan, Danny Kilpatrick, Dan Persona, Darkest Abyss, David Carr, David Host, Dilatar Tepes, Desiree Corruption, Dirt Possum, Dollar Store DJ, El Jaguar, Emmeline Payne, Etham Kalash, Eugene, Fuzzmosis, Garbage Person, Glenn Haven, Half HP, Hibernia Scholar, High Food Court, Horace Rees, Industrial Illusion, Izzy Lexus, Jack the Nipper, Jared Bynum, J Bud Airline, Jehudi, John B, Joshua Ayers, Justin Darnell, Kale, Captain Ketchup, Kenny Mitchell, Kevin Hanley, Kira Virgil, Krizik, Kiowa, Lamont Atkinson Robertson, Mira, Magic Circuit, Max Grosshandler, Meownarchy, aka Roxy, Micah Powers, Mortags Gaming, Mr. Loser, Mr. Eater, Neck Out the Brave, Nick Wolf, Noise, Paul Fierce, Pazuzu, Pretty Dude, Rabbit, Rez, Richard Cutting, Richard Sanchez, Rog U, Saint Murray, SC Fade, Shannon Gates, Shivering Dova, Sigma Simp 69, Silatixo, Somewhat Spooky, Superior Posterior, Sway Evenly, The Plath, The Stoic One, Toffee SMT, Tucky Ducky, Vinci, Wolfram C, Zach Diedrich, and Zethrin. As well as these dungeon connoisseurs, 84D93R, 8-Bit Unicorn, Akai Kiki, Alberto Amatucci, Alex Nadeau, Alex Renko, Ambrowski, Andrew Tovanidi, Angin01, Anthony Labella, Aranai Saez, Arrested Rabbit, Ashley Black, Ava M. Dumas, Burger Von Burger, Bewildering Avocado, Blue Mantis, Bunzo, Keiichi, Captain Doctor, Captain Swing, Cassandra M, Cat Cathedral, Churm Slurm, Chumpkins, Claim, Claire Myers, Cloudy Wizard, Cohort, Concrete Mascara, Cool Dr. Money, Cormac, Crassus Zero, Crippler Jones, Crooked Rook, Dale Walden, Daniel Tallow, Daphne, Dazed Clockwork, Deeko, Doroko, Devil's Honey, Dr. Jellybean, Dragon Ace, SG7, Drebo Bebop, Drykantbrot, Dungeon Chili, Dust Bunny, Eric Clapton, Fangro, Francine Bridge, Fremder, Gandalf the Gay, Glitterthroat, Gloria Gordon, Ocon Boyum, Harvey Bodega, Heartman, I'm in Your Walls Drinking Soup, Icehammer82, Indigo Happy, Irregular Rob, It's a Mia, Nekokami, Jack in the Candle, James Chambers, Jason Cook, J-Rob, Jeffrey Koenig, Gemma, Joan Valise, Joe Gother, Jollybean, Joshua Weber, King Bonkers Error 1884, Karen Rosenau, Nomadic, Critter, Lady Nagram, Lampshader, Limidgeton, Leonardo Schwarz de Souza, Liana, Lux Custodes, Macrophage, Man with Confetti, Masakishi, Matt Norad, Max Cohen, McEldritch, Meatman, Michael H. Prey, Michael Oliver, Minced Meat, Miss M, Mr. Independent, Monkey Kid 61, Mr. Al Packleton, Mumbles, Nick, Old Dead Lemons, Olof Albine, Please Keep Making Videos, Rezo 55555, Rifflesby, Roland, Sable, Scorpix22, Sensei Wolfman, Shart King, Sean, Silius Sotus, Cicerin, Skyclad Weeb, Solar, Sorbet, Spencer Newton, T, Talony Dew, Taylor Martin, The Mangled Pancreas, Thief of 16-Bit Technology, Tor Dragon, True Axiom, Tuesday Twin, TV's Brent, Vexen Dagrin, Violet, Volkendo, Warrior Song, Wild and Horned Hermit, Zucker, Zills, Your Man in Japan, Zachary R. Kane, and Zorik. Thank you all for your support, and thank you very much for watching. Until next time, Time Twist. Check it out. Dungeon Chill. Out.